BYD is the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to the Chinese car market, where it outsells car brands like Volkswagen and Toyota. But that doesn't mean that every BYD is a smashing sales success. Today, we're going to talk about a BYD that's very good, but isn't exactly setting the sales charts on fire, the BYD Song L.
While monthly sales of some BYD models can crest 20 or 30,000 units, they only managed to move 1,660 units of the Song L last month. But why? Let's start by having a look at the styling.
Welcome to the modern world, fellow wagon lovers, where the best you can hope for is a low-slung SUV that kind of looks like a wagon. But while the Song L fails to be a true wagon, it succeeds in being a very good-looking SUV. It also might be a very familiar-looking SUV, because this rides on the same platform and uses a very similar body style to the Denza N7 that we previously reviewed on the channel, as well as the BYD Sea Lion 07, which we haven't gotten around to reviewing quite yet. At $26,000 to $32,000 US, it's also very similarly priced to the Sea Lion 07 and has very similar performance. That might go away towards explaining why both these cars haven't been selling very well in the Chinese car market so far, because they might be stealing sales from each other. There's also, by the way, another Song L model, the Song L DMI, a PHEV that has completely different styling and platform underneath of it and sells quite a bit better than this one. A quick aside about the name of this car. It is part of BYD's Dynasty series, in which all the models are named after different Chinese dynasties. So you've got the Han, the Tang, the Qin, the Song. As you can imagine, this is the Chinese character for Song, which uses the Song Dynasty name. I think that this series is one of the best attempts at leveraging China's long history from any automaker so far. It's simple, it's historical, it's interesting, and it's a heck of a lot easier to pronounce than something like Fangcheng Bao.
One of the things I've always appreciated about the Dynasty series cars is their handsome, restrained designs, particularly the BYD Han and Tang. Compare this to cars from the Ocean series, i.e. the Seagull, Dolphin, and Seal, all of which are interesting and even good-looking designs, but often have just a few too many design cues for their own good.
The designers of the Song L, on the other hand, they quit while they were ahead. You've got this strong belt line here that joins with an even stronger haunch. Then, that meets up with a smooth sculpting here on the door to create a shape that thrusts the design forward. One piece of advice for potential Song L buyers, get this car in a lighter color. I think dark colors like black or this soul-sucking dark gray shrink this design to the point where it looks like a compact SUV instead of a mid-size one. Go with a light color because it's necessary for you to be able to see the light play across the sculpted surfaces of this design. The sloping roofline, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute because there's some sacrifices involved with those good looks, is complemented by twin spoilers up here. If I could complain about one thing on this exterior design, it would be the fact that they didn't use their best taillight design. That would be the one that's inspired by Chinese knot tying techniques. We saw it on the refreshed version of the BYD Han last year. I love that design, and I really wish that they had used this here on this other Dynasty series car. Setting aside my disappointment for a moment and opening up the rear hatch, we reveal a rear cargo area with 410 liters of space with the second row up and 1,053 when you lay them down. That's around 30% less than a BYD Seal U, which I think is one reason this car isn't selling as well as it could. Most buyers are probably going to opt for a more traditionally shaped SUV that's just more practical. There is also a frunk measuring 48 liters. Remember all that praise that I heaped on the exterior design of the BYD Tang and Han? Well, I have no such praise for their interior design, which is as overwrought as almost any other BYD. Enter the Song L. It's like a breath of fresh air on a hot day. Whether it's material choice and quality or overall aesthetics, I think this is one of the best interiors you can get from BYD today. Take the center console. Whereas the Han and Tang use capacitive touch buttons here, these are physical buttons, which not only are easier to use and interact with when you're driving, they're also easier to read under direct sunlight. The interior mood lighting, which runs the interior of the car all the way around you, is simple and adds something without being overwhelming. I also like the way that it interacts with the pattern you see in the plastic trim that is throughout the car. Of course, most of the functions are still controlled via the 15.6-inch center screen, which runs BYD's familiar operating system. Like other BYD operating systems, it's very simple, very easy to navigate, but also, in my opinion, a little bit, I don't want to say low-end looking. It just doesn't look particularly high-end, that's for sure. Still easy to use and operate. The seats. Heated, cooled, massaging. Boy, are you getting tired of me saying that? Because I'm getting tired of saying it to you because it's on almost every single Chinese EV these days. But that just speaks to how incredibly competitive this market has become. You do have some more buttons here on the steering wheel, including one that I want to point out, which is actually the paddles on the back of the wheel. These are used not for changing gears, because this don't have gears. Well, it's got one gear. In fact, these are used to activate the driver assistance system, which we are definitely going to get to later when we get on the road. I mentioned that this car does have nice interior material quality and choice, but that doesn't mean there isn't plastic in here. That center console, obviously, and this particular piece here on the back of the seat does look and feel a little bit cheap to me, but hey, it peaks at $32,000, so what can you expect? Space here in the back seat is pretty good. Legroom, as you can see, with the seat adjusted for somebody of my height. I'm 5'9" or 1.75 meters tall. Speaking of which, headroom here with this seat adjusted, the rake of it adjusted all the way back. I would say I've got about 3 fingers on top of my head. Surprisingly good for a car with this coupe-style roofline. Rear passengers get their own diminutive little screen down here where they can control the air conditioning settings for the back row, as well as the heated seats for the left and right seats. It is a very simple display and one that I kind of enjoy. It's got almost a retro feeling to it. However, it is difficult to read in direct sunlight. The Song L is available with 71.8 and 87 kilowatt-hour Blade LFP battery packs, which provide a range of 550 to 662 kilometers on the rear motor versions of this car, and 602 kilometers on the dual motor, which this is absolutely not. This is actually a single rear motor long range version, which means 230 kilowatts or about 310 horsepower, instead of the dual motor, which would have 380 kilowatts and or over 500 horsepower. I have to admit that I was a little bit disappointed when I got to the dealership earlier this week and found out that it wasn't a dual motor we were borrowing, but this rear motor long range. Then I remembered, actually, I couldn't care less. This long range is perfectly adequate for our test for 2 reasons. One, I think it's the one that most people are going to end up buying because it's got the longest range. And 2, its 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of 6.5 seconds is plenty fast for a mid-size electric SUV. You don't really need the 4.3 seconds of that dual motor. I'll tell you one thing I would not accept, however, and that's the base car, which only has 150 kilowatts. That's the same power level as our BYD Yuan Plus, which is a much cheaper, much smaller car, and I think it would be not very nice to drive, so hard pass. The entire Song L lineup comes standard with BYD's DCIS-C, which is their BYD speak for constant damping control. That means that it has adjustable firmness for the dampers. Unfortunately, however, you can't individually adjust the dampers. What I mean is there's not a setting in the menu to just say, okay, I want the dampers on stiff. They're tied to the driving mode. So if you want the stiffest damper setting, you also have to accept the sportiest accelerator pedal adjustment. You also, for example, couldn't mix the comfort ride with the very sensitive throttle. I think that would be much nicer to have, perhaps maybe just some kind of custom driving mode. That would be appreciated. This car, along with the C-Line, is essentially the SUV version of the BYD Seal sedan, which is one of my favorite Chinese cars to drive, and I'm happy to say that it retains some of the characteristics of the Seal sedan that I love so much. For example, the feedback that you get through this double wishbone front and 5-link rear suspension is unlike that of almost any other Chinese SUV, actually unlike most Chinese sedans as well. So I'm very happy that they've retained that kind of feedback. It makes it a more engaging car to drive. This car uses the same D-Pilot 300 aka Celestial IB driver assistance system as the Denza N9 that we recently reviewed. That means that it should have the same capabilities as not only that system, but also systems from Xpeng and Huawei, aka highway and city navigation on autopilot. This thing, however, only has one LiDAR unit versus the two on the Denza N9. And I'm not sure if that's why, but I can tell you that this thing's behavior and performance are not equivalent to the N9, even though they're supposed to be. My main issue with this system, when compared to that of the N9, let alone that of an Xpeng or Huawei vehicle, is the fact that it is really, really conservative. And that's not the worst thing that one of these driver assistance systems can be. That would be, overly aggressive and overly confident, but it does make it a little bit frustrating and even annoying to use. For example, it takes my commands to change speeds via the steering wheel buttons here. It's not really commands, but rather polite suggestions that it could get around to later. Maybe it'll think about it. It would also do things like repeatedly veer away from the fence that acted as a barrier between the two lanes, or it would have some fan and braking issues. These are things I just don't expect to see from the latest systems. It's a reminder that while BYD has made great strides in their driver assistance, it's still going to take them some time to catch up to the latest systems, the most advanced systems from Huawei or Xpeng. I've already touched on some of the reasons I think this car hasn't sold very well so far, such as the coupe SUV shape that makes it less practical than traditional square SUVs. But I think the biggest reason has to be price and positioning. This thing at $26,000 to $32,000 US on the low end is competing with high-spec versions of cheaper brands like Deepal. On the high end, like this spec, it's getting into the territory of truly luxurious cars like the Avatar 07 with its class-leading Huawei driver assistance, or the Zeekr 7X with its class-leading handling. Either way, the Song L finds itself in a no-man's land in the market. And the thing about a no-man's land, there's no one in there to actually buy the car.